Okay, so what's the topic today? So we're learning the laws again, continuing to learn the laws of borrowed item, entrusted items. In other words, guardians. Sheila Pikadin, the laws of entrusted item, chapter 7. And this, so we had all kinds of laws in this last 7 chapters about the parameters of the responsibility of the guardian, etc. Now we're going to talk about how do you end the deal? In other words, how does the guardian conclude his responsibility? So, for example, you ask me, can you guard this object? I say, sure. At some point, I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. Could I come to you? Could I give it back to you? Where do I give it back to you? Do I have to give it back to you in your home? What happens if you're on vacation? What happens if you're out of state? So you see that there could be a tremendous amount of scenarios where it's not so easy to give back the object. That's number one. So I'm the guardian. What happens? You're the owner of the object, and you come to me and you say you want the object back. But I say, yeah, but I'm on vacation in Florida. I'm not home in Greenwich. But you say, yeah, I need my object back. I need it now. But I say, I'm not going home now. I'm not going home. I'm not going back to Greenwich till the spring. So in other words, could you, the owner of the object, could you demand that I give you back this object at any point, at any place? So like I said, there's a whole host of questions that tie into this discussion. And that's the subject of this section of Maimonides, based on a Talmudic Mishnah and the elaboration of the Mishnah. So that's I think that I would say would be the background of what's happening here.
Can I ask you a quick question,
Yes.
Rabbi? There are no contracts. I mean, if there is a contract,
No contract.
Yeah, so if there is a contract, if there is an agreement, then it's kind of out of the question. I mean, it's out of the scope of the discussion.
Yeah.
But how come you have like an open-ended agreement?
Because we're not living in a litigious society today. You can't do anything before signing a 15-page contract, right? You can't. You don't want in a society where every time I go to the bank and make a transaction, well, the bank is not. There's no bank. Every time I need to do something, I need to hire a lawyer to write the transaction and to anticipate every scenario, right? Think about a contract that would have to anticipate every scenario that the Talmud anticipates. So we're trying to create a situation where let's not think about the contract. If they make a contract, they make a contract. If they happen to be creative enough and spell out the scenario, very good. But if they have not done that, let's think about what's common sense and what's fair, and what we assume was the assumption, was the state of mind of these people, right? Even in American law, you have the question of the meeting of the minds. What do we assume? Some things would maybe not be explicit in the contract, because not everything could be explicit in the contract. But the question becomes, what do we assume the people who signed this contract? What do we assume that they would have in mind, that they would think? So that's what we're going to try to do here. But again, if you burden society and you say if there's no contract, you have no protection. Okay, so what do I do if there's no what do I do if there's no contract? So let's basically say a simple point. You ask me to guard your object and in the city, and then I take it, and a month later we're walking through the desert, and I realize that in the desert is a dangerous place, and I don't really want to guard your object in the desert. So I walk up to you in the desert and I say, here is your object. Now, what's your response? You say you don't want to take it in the desert. What are you going to do with it in the desert? The desert is not a place where you can protect it properly. So you claim that you don't want to take it back because you gave it to me in the city. You want it back in the city. I claim, listen, I never committed to be a guardian for a certain amount of time. I concluded my obligation. I don't want to be responsible anymore. Here, I'm giving it back to you. So what do you think? What would you say?
Well, if there is no contract, then,
No contract.
if there is no contract, that you should expect something like that. You either when you take the object, you say, okay, yeah, I'm going on vacation at certain point, I'm going to the desert at certain
Right,
point,
right.
or the other side should also
But
anticipate.
let's say it was not stated. Let's say it was not stated. You come to me and you in a town in Greenwich and you say, can you protect my computer? I say, sure, I can protect your computer. That's the end of my agreement. Then I catch you in the desert and I say, here's your Apple computer. You're like, what am I going to do with a computer? Right? I catch you, what are you going to do with this? So you say, I don't want it back. I gave it to you in town. Give it back to me in the town. What is that? Right? That's your claim.
Right, but it also, if you're talking about assumptions, you have to assume that there is some kind of special relationship between the borrower and the guardian, because you cannot just ask somebody from the street to
Right. There's
guard
some
you
level
up.
of trust. Correct.
So,
Correct.
some level of trust, some kind of relationship. So
Right.
everything is based on that.
Right. Or neighborly. Correct. But the question is when I accept, could we say that when I accept your computer in Greenwich, the assumption is I'm going to return it to you in Greenwich? That's the question. Or even if not in Greenwich, in civilization, right? When I say that I'm going to guard your object, I didn't say how long, and I didn't say where I'm going to give it back to you, but is part of guarding it is returning it to someone when they would be capable of guarding it. If I give it back to you in Mount Everest, what are you going to do with it? In other words, the question is, when I accept responsibility to guard, there's some parameters. I can't be negligent. Maybe returning it to the person in a situation where they have no ability to protect it, maybe that's not included. That is not included. In other words, that would be in defiance of my commitment to guard. So that would be,
yes, I agree with that.
that's
So
the argument.
it's out of the, but I mean, you cannot assume that will be able to guard it any single minute, no matter where I am.
No, so this case is
I mean, to return
I can't return it. Yeah,
to
so
accept
that's a
it,
straightforward law.
no matter where I am, right?
Right, I can't return it where I am. That's a straightforward law indeed. And that's a law that we'll read it in Maimonides, then we'll read it in the Talmud, and then we'll see there's some things that are even more interesting in a way that were not stated. And that's what not stated in the Talmud or in Maimonides, in the post-Talmudic and post-Rambam commentaries discuss, and that becomes fascinating. So let's just get our feet wet here a little bit. Chapter 7, section 11. It looks pretty straightforward. One may demand the return of an entrusted object or an object that was lost and discovered only in the original case. Okay, so original place. Okay, this is the opposite. This is the opposite case. We're starting from the opposite case. Let's start from the second half and we'll go back to the first half, because I want to just stay focused on what we discussed. If a person entrusted an article to a colleague in a settled community, in other words, in a city, and the colleague brought the entrusted article with him to the desert, the owner is not required to accept it from him. Instead, the owner may tell the watchman, you are responsible for it until you return it to me as settled land, just like I entrusted it to you in a settled land. So this is the law, and this is the point here. The point here is that if you gave it to me in a society, in a city, in a settled place, I have to return it to you in a settled place. I cannot return it to you in the desert. And if I want to return it to you in the desert, you have the right to say, I'm not taking it, and it's going to still be in the responsibility of the owner to protect it. That's what we have in the second half. This first half is going to be a little bit more subtle. We'll read the first half as well. Why don't we do that? One may demand the return of entrusted object or an object that was lost and discovered only in the original place. So here it's the opposite. Here it's talking about the demand. So you're the owner, you demand it. So you give me a computer in Greenwich. Then we're both on vacation in Florida. You show up to me in my hotel room in Florida, and you say, I really need my computer back. And I say, wonderful, I'm happy to give it back to you. It's sitting in my house in Greenwich. But you say, I want it back. we remember there was no time, so I presumably have to get it back to you whenever you want it back. But I say I'm not going back to Greenwich for 6 months. So the question is, do I have to go back and get it for you? Or do we just wait till I go back home? Or do you have to pay for someone to go get it? So that's what the beginning of 11 says. One may demand the return of an entrusted object or an object that was lost and discovered only in the original place. If you find me in Greenwich, you could tell me I want my object back right now, and then I have to give it to you. So there's two scenarios. One is the entrusted object. You asked me to hold something. Another object is if I find your lost object. So I found your wallet. I found it in Greenwich. Now I'm in Florida. You want it back in Florida. I don't have to go back home to get it to you. You come to me, or you pay for the guy. You wait till I'm home, or you pay for someone to go bring it, right? So that's what we're saying. A lost object and a found object and a object that was an entrusted object and an object that was found could only be demanded in its original place. What is implied? If he entrusted the article to him in Jerusalem, he cannot demand its return in Nov, in another city. If the watchman returns it to him in Nov, he must accept it. So this is very interesting. There is a difference between the owner demanding and the watchman receiving. The owner could only demand it back in Jerusalem. You gave it to me in Jerusalem, I give it back to you. Can only demand it back in Jerusalem. But the guardian can get it out much quicker. If you gave me the object in Jerusalem, I can give it to you in any city. The owner can't say, I only want it back in the city that I gave it to you in, right? Here, the guardian has much more leeway. I can give it back to you anywhere, as long as it's a city. And unlike the second half of 11, which says, I cannot give it back to you. I can't force you to accept it in a desert. So just to summarize, let's say you give me your Apple computer in Greenwich. Then we're in Florida. You want it back. You said, Menachem, could you give me my computer? I said, I don't have it. It's in Greenwich. I don't have to go back to Greenwich to get it. But the guardian, you gave it to me in Greenwich. I have a choice. I can give it back to you in Greenwich, or I can give it back to you in Florida, or any other settled area. The only place I cannot give it back to you is in a place that's not settled. So here we're trying to strike the balance of giving the guardian a way out. I don't have to return it to you in the exact same location that you gave it to me. Unlike the owner who can only demand it in that same location. But the guardian does not have to give it back in any location. And in the same location, he can give it back in any location, as long as it's a city. I can't give it back to you in a place that's not a city. So that's the balance that we strike. And that's relatively straightforward. The post, then, like I said, is one more issue I want to address that's not explicit in the Talmud or in Maimonides, but it's in the commentaries of Maimonides. Before we do that, I just want to clarify, make sure everything is clear. So far, so good?
Yeah, that's good. It makes sense because, because basically the guardian is doing the owner a favor.
I'm doing a favor. So you give me more ways to get out. The owner, I did you a favor. I accepted your computer. I went on vacation to Florida. What now? I have to drive back a few hundred miles to go give it back to you? 2,000 miles. I don't have to do that. But if you're the guardian, I did you a favor. I'm going to give it back to you whenever I want. Because remember, until I give it back to you, I'm still responsible. So I still have liability. I want to close down my liability. I want to end my liability, right? So for me to end my liability, I can do it in any place as long as it's a settled area and not the desert. Okay, now comes the fun. Here is the scenario. Let's say you give me your computer and you say, Menachem, could you watch this for me for a month? I say, sure, I could watch it for a month. You give me the computer. 2 weeks later, I get bored. And I don't want to watch it anymore. Can I come back, knock on your door, and give you your computer within the time that we agreed upon? I say, I don't want to do it anymore. You say, Menachem, you committed for a month. I don't want to take it back now. It's 2 weeks late. Vicky says, I want you, if you committed for a month, you still have to continue watching it for a month. And if you don't watch it, the guardian will be liable. So could you break out of an agreement early? Could the guardian break out of the agreement early? That's the question that was raised based on this concept. Once we got into the discussion of how do we end the location where I would end my responsibility as a guardian. So the Talmud doesn't take that to the question of time, but the other commentaries say, okay, so what happens time? I want to end it not in a different place, but I want to end it in a different time. I want to end it earlier. So we agreed that it's going to be a month. We both agreed. There's no dispute about that. I come and I say, Vicky, I'm sorry, I had enough. 2 weeks. I can't sleep at night. I'm too worried about protecting your computer. I'm giving it back to you in your house. You say you agree to accept it for a month. Or you agree to accept liability for a month. You can't change your position right now. You can't change your contract right now. So the question is, who's right? Could I give it to you? Could I give it to you early? Could I wiggle out of my responsibility early? That is the question.
Well, if I was to ask that question, I would probably decide in favor of the guardian, because again, the guardian is doing a favor, so he can. What if the circumstances changed and he cannot guard anymore?
Okay. So that's an interesting question. If the circumstances change, you have to leave. If you have to leave, so there is a second halacha Maimonides. Hold that thought right now. I want to jump to Rambam 1 second. Hold that thought. This is again not about time, but about place. Let me see if let's just read section 12. A question arose when a person entrusts an article to a colleague and then journeys overseas. So you ask me, could you watch your computer? I say yes. Then you go onto a boat to Paris. Okay. Afterward, the watchman also desires to travel overseas or depart in a caravan. There is an authority who ruled that if the watchman brings the entrusted article to the Jewish court, he is absolved of his responsibility. So Maimonides says that the Rambam says the Gemara doesn't talk about that case, but there is an opinion who says I can't give it back to you because you left, you went out of town. So what I do is I take it to the court and let the court watch it, and then my responsibility is absolved. Says Rambam, these are well-reasoned words. For we do not imprison the watchman in the city because of the object entrusted to him by a person who departed overseas. The watchman cannot take the entrusted article with him, lest it be destroyed by factors beyond his control. The court should then entrust the article to a faithful person. This is like returning a lost object to its owner. Says Maimonides, you give me your object, you go out of town, you cross the sea, I want to leave. Says Rambam, you're not trapped in the city because you agreed to be a guardian. You take it to the court. The court will find a nice guy who wants to do a favor, return a lost object to its original owner, and find another guardian. But I can go to the court and say, someone gave me this object, he checked out of town, I'm not staying here forever, I'm giving it to the court will accept it. Okay, so that's your logic. I'm not stuck in prison. However, the difference is, in 12, it was not specified. I never agreed. Our case, that's the case where you went across the seas, and I want to also leave. But there was no acceptance by the part of the guardian for a limited amount of time. Here, in the case that I'm discussing, that's not written explicitly in the Talmud, I clearly told you I'm going to watch it for a month. I clearly accepted that. A given amount of time. The question is, could I wiggle out of a commitment that I made to you? Right? So I'm not imprisoned. Well, nobody asked you to accept that commitment, right? In section 12 that we just read, I didn't accept any commitment. I didn't accept any time. You give me your computer, then you decide to leave town. I also want to leave town, so I could take it to the court because I'm not stuck in prison, in the words of Rambam. But here, I gave you a 30-day commitment. Do I have to keep my 30-day commitment, or could I drop it in your mailbox or hand it to you 2 weeks into the commitment? That is the question.
If there are no reason, no circumstances changed, so why would you? Yeah,
I'm interested. I can't sleep at night. I'm too worried about your expensive computer liability. I don't need liability. So could you back out of your commitment? That's essentially the question. So
it really depends on the relationship, I guess.
The question, we can't look at the relationship. We have to look at, what do we think was included in my commitment? If I committed to 30 days and that commitment was without any exit strategies, then I have to keep my word. You got to keep your word, right? There's no, that's clear. You have to keep your word. You have to keep your commitment. The question is, Yeah. So I'll tell you, basically, there's a commentary. Maggid Mishnah says one opinion, and then other commentaries say otherwise. A very, very beautiful concept. We'll start at the point that the guy says, the Maggid Mishnah says, you cannot back out early. You made a commitment, you can't break that commitment. That's one opinion. The other opinion says, and this is very creative, and this is what I wanted to bring to your attention, because it's actually beautiful. The other opinion says, so brilliant. Other brilliant opinion says, it depends. In some scenarios, you can break out, not because it wasn't the commitment, but from a roundabout way. What do I mean? Says the other commentary, his name is the Machne Ephraim, his name of his book. Brilliant analysis. He says like this. It all depends. It depends if you're a paid guardian or an unpaid guardian, and it's going to be counterintuitive. The unpaid guardian who's doing a favor and seemingly want to help the unpaid guardian, he didn't have to do it. He's doing a favor. He's not getting anything in return. The unpaid guardian cannot back out. The paid guardian could back out. So if you pay me $30 to watch it for 30 days, I can back out after 2 weeks and give you back $15. Why would you say that? Why would you penalize the unpaid guardian, the guy who did a favor? So this is a very interesting law. We touched upon this law. I think we touched upon this law a long time ago. The law was like this. The law is the Torah has special protections for a worker, a day laborer, to be able to quit. If I committed to you that I'm going to work for the day, I'm allowed to quit at any point, and with protecting my salary for the time that I worked. Now, there's 3 pages in the Talmud talking about the parameters of this law. But the principle is, Payel, a worker, is allowed to quit in the middle of the day. Why? Because the verse says, God says, the Jewish people are slaves to me, not servants to servants. In other words, if you tell me that if I agree to work for you from 9 to 5, and I cannot quit in the middle of the day, and if I quit at 12 o'clock, I will lose the salary that I earned in the first half a day, so you're forcing me not to quit, then you're saying I'm a slave. If I can't quit, I'm a slave. If I could quit without losing the money that I already earned, if I could quit, then I'm not a slave. So that's the law. The law is a worker is allowed to quit midday. Fine. Now, keeping that in mind, you go back to the guardian and paid guardian and unpaid guardian. He quotes from the Talmud that says an unpaid guardian doesn't have to work. If you come and you give me your computer, right? Because unpaid guardian, his level of responsibility is not so high. I just have to put it in a safe place. I put the computer in my closet. I don't have to work. I have no other responsibility. I just put it in a safe place. So because I have no other responsibility other than putting it in a safe place, I'm not classified as someone working. If I'm not working, I can't quit. I made a commitment for 30 days. I can't back out. But what happens if I'm a paid guardian? If I'm a paid guardian, I have responsibility, additional responsibility to this object. Because I'm getting paid. I can't just put it in the closet. I have to make sure it's safe. I have to walk around at night. I have to do actions. I have to take action to make sure it's safe. Oh, so a paid guardian is classified as a worker because he has to work to protect the object. Because he's classified as a worker, he has to be able to get out, because if not, he's a slave because you're forcing him to work. So I think this is absolutely brilliant because they're taking a different law, applying it here, and it's counterintuitive because you would think we would give the unpaid guardian who just did a favor, we would give the unpaid guardian a way out much quicker than the paid guardian, but we don't. Because the unpaid guardian, in other words, your commitment is commitment. There's no way to get out. The commitment for 30 days, that's your commitment. You can't get out. The only way we can get you out is if you committed to work. And if you commit to work, you can always get out. Why? Because you're not a slave. So I think I read this yesterday. I thought this was beautiful and worth sharing. So to me, I really enjoyed it. So I hope you did. So thank you for joining so we can study this piece together.
Thank you, Rabbi. But it does kind of depends on the relationship, because with the relationship, when you guard for the money, it doesn't have to be like a trusted that level of trust, right? Because you just pay somebody to. So it does depend on.
It does, of course, it depends, but the relationship is the background. That we're looking at the commitment and the logical perspective. In other words, the starting point that the people agree with, that if you made a commitment You have to keep that commitment. You can't say I committed to guard, and then I got tired, so I'm not going to guard. You made a commitment. That's a commitment is worth something. So again, the Talmud doesn't talk about it. Maimonides doesn't talk about it. But the Maggid Mishnah commentary on Maimonides says, I'll quote you what he says. He says, if I find it, he says like this. He says that to find him. Oh, I didn't put the.
Yeah, it is brilliant. I mean, it is brilliant to compare it to
a laborer, right? Right. So the Maggid Mishnah, the starting point is no, you can't back out because you are because you made a commitment. Fine. And you can't break that commitment. We have no legal way to break a commitment, right? The fact that it wasn't signed in a document doesn't matter. Could you imagine, Vicky, if I wrote a contract and I said, Vicky, I commit to watch your object for 30 days for free, and we got it signed by my lawyers and your lawyers, then you say I can't back out. So just because there's no document, it doesn't mean the commitment is any less powerful. And therefore, I made a commitment for 30 days. I can't back out before the 30 days. The catch is that if I'm a paid guardian, you can't just put it in your closets. You're classified as a payal. In other places in the Talmud we see, you're classified as a worker. If you're classified as a worker, then you got to work. I'm sorry, if you're classified as a worker, then you could quit. Because if you can't quit, you'd be a slave, and you're not a slave. You're not a slave. You're not a slave. You're only a servant to God, not a servant to other human beings. So
yeah, it is brilliant. But what if the circumstances? What if I need to go to like a urgent, like unexpected business trip?
So then it's on my costs. When I make a commitment, sometimes I have to hire. So I have to outsource it. So I'll have to hire. I'm a paid guardian. I'm an unpaid guardian. Find a friend that will guard it. If I can't find a friend that will guard it, then pay someone to guard it. That's part of a commitment. Sometimes I had a story today, right? I committed yesterday to take somebody somewhere. Okay. Turned out to me that because of that commitment, today I have a tremendous inconvenience. I have to inconvenience my wife. I have to inconvenience. It's a big inconvenience. But yesterday I told someone I could do something for them. And therefore, I'm going to keep my part. I'm going to keep my commitment, even though there's a big inconvenience for me. In fact, I turned the clock back. Yesterday, when the person asked me for this favor, I would say no. But I said yes. And the person made plans based on that. So so I'm going to suffer. What am I going to do? That's the price of the price of giving your word, right? And I know. Oh, remember, you want us. I know that if that person tells me he'll do something for me, he's not going to back out the last second. And if he has to back out the last second, if he has an emergency, he'll find a solution. In other words, he'll hire someone else to do it, etc. So you want a scenario where when someone tells you something, you could assume that that's the case, and you could make plans based on that, right? So if I can't do it, so if I can't be the guardian, so I'll have to find somebody else or hire someone else. So worst comes to worst, not fulfill, and that'll be my liability. So that's the story. So it's interesting that even the people that say the guardian, the paid guardian could back out, they can't let him out based on his commitment. His commitment is solid. We let him out because from a different legal theory. You're an employee, and employees can always quit without penalty, without losing the hours that they already earned.
But your last comment kind of makes you think twice before you make a commitment.
100%. That's good. That's a good thing. I'm not doing you any favor, Vicky. If you tell me, can you watch my computer for 30 days? And I say yes, and I don't think the consequences, and then I back out in the middle. I'm not helping anybody. If you're going to say yes, think about it, take the responsibility and say yes. And if you say no, you say no. If I can't, I'll say no. But the other side is that when I give you a commitment, when I get a commitment from you, I know that I can count on it. I can make plans based on what you told me. Right? It's very upsetting if someone, you have a boss or you have a colleague and they make a plan and the last second they say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm out of town, so we're changing. What do you mean you're changing? I just lined up my whole day to be in line with what you wanted, with what you told me. Right? So you want to live, you want to live in a culture where people tell you something and that commitment is meaningful. Now, if you don't want, if you can't commit, it's too early to tell. So say it's too early to tell. You ask me, could you watch my computer for 30 days? And if I think I may not be able to do it, I say, you know what, I'll try. But if I have to get it back in the middle, I will. And that's nothing wrong with saying that, as long as I said it. Right? All we said is if I committed for 30 days, then I can't back out of my commitment. But at the outset, I could say, look, Vicky, I'm happy to try it. And if it works, it will work. And if it doesn't work, if I can't do it, I'll give it back to you in the middle. And if you agree, then we have a deal. But you're right, you have to think about it in the outset, because making a commitment is a commitment, and people are going to make plans based on that. And a commitment means something, 100%.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's amazing how in this short 2 paragraphs, there is so
Yes.
much insight, psychological insight, and you touched
Incredible.
on so many
It's
areas
incredible.
of like boundaries and relationships, and
Incredible. That's incredible. Yeah.
amazing.
I love this. Yeah, this is a great piece. Okay. Thank you, Vicky. Have a wonderful day. Oh, tomorrow we're not going to meet. Kids are out of school. It's a little complicated. So we'll skip tomorrow, but we'll do Thursday, God willing. And Thursday is the 3rd of Tammuz. Thursday's the site. So we'll make sure to read some of the Rebbe's teachings, as we always do, but we'll make sure even more.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.